There was a woman whose voice could shake an entire stadium. When she opened her mouth, 20,000 people would stop breathing at the same time. Critics called her the greatest white blues singer in the history of American music. Strangers wrote her letters saying her songs had saved their lives. And yet, in a quiet hotel room in New York City, late at night, after the applause had faded and the band had gone home, she sat alone at a small wooden desk, holding a pen that trembled in her hand, writing a letter to two people whose approval she had been chasing her entire life. Her parents. Her name was Janis Joplin, and the real story of Janis Joplin was never the story the world saw on stage. The real story was written in pencil, on hotel stationery, in letters that most people have never read. Letters where the loudest voice in rock and roll became a small, uncertain girl again. A girl still waiting for her father to say one simple sentence, "I am proud of you." But the truth is, Janis Joplin's story did not begin in a recording studio. It began much earlier, in a small refinery town in southeast Texas, in a place called Port Arthur. And to understand why she wrote those letters, we have to go back to the very beginning. Because what happened in that town shaped every note she would ever sing for the rest of her short, unforgettable life. Janis Lynn Joplin was born on January 19, 1943 in Port Arthur, Texas. Her father, Seth Joplin, was a quiet, thoughtful engineer who worked at the Texaco oil refinery. Her mother, Dorothy Joplin, was the registrar at a local business college. They were, by every outward measure, a respectable American family. Clean house, polite manners, church on Sunday, dinner at 6. In a town built on oil and conformity, the Joplin family was exactly what Port Arthur expected a family to be. And for a while, little Janis fit into that world too. She was a bright child, curious, artistic. She painted, she read, she sang in the church choir. Her parents encouraged her intelligence and her creativity. Her father, in particular, introduced her to books and ideas that most children in Port Arthur never encountered. He was the kind of man who could sit quietly in a chair for an hour with a philosophy book. He believed in a concept he called the Saturday night swindle. The idea that people spend their whole week waiting for one night of happiness, and that happiness never quite comes. It was a sad philosophy to pass down to a child, but Janis absorbed it. She absorbed everything her father said, because more than anything in the world, she wanted to make him proud. She wanted him to look at her the way he looked at the books on his shelf, with respect, with interest, with love. But something began to shift when Janis entered adolescence, and that shift would mark her forever. By the time Janis turned 14, her body had changed in ways Port Arthur did not forgive. She gained weight, her skin broke out badly. Her face, which had been so pretty in childhood photographs, became the target of cruel teenagers. And in a small Texas town in the late 1950s, cruelty had no filter. The boys at Thomas Jefferson High School mocked her relentlessly. The girls whispered behind her back, and then laughed when she passed them in the hallway. She was called ugly. She was called fat. She was called worse things too painful to repeat here, but the cruelty did not stop at her appearance. Janis had opinions. She read books other students did not read. She listened to black blues singers like Bessie Smith and Odetta and Lidbelly, music that most white kids in Port Arthur considered inappropriate. She questioned segregation at a time and place where questioning segregation was dangerous. She befriended the few students who were considered outcasts. And for all of this, Port Arthur punished her. She came home from school crying more times than she could count. She locked herself in her bedroom and painted. She wrote in journals. She listened to records on a small record player, letting the voices of black blues women wrap around her like a blanket. Because those voices understood something her classmates never could. Those voices understood pain. Those voices understood what it felt like to be outside. And slowly, without even realizing it, Janis began to sing along, at first quietly, then louder still. But there was something else happening in that house in Port Arthur. Something quieter. Something that would follow Janis for the rest of her life. Her mother, Dorothy, did not know what to do with her daughter. Dorothy was a woman of the 1950s. She believed in fitting in. She believed in dresses and good posture and polite conversation. She looked at her strange, sensitive, rebellious daughter and she worried. She worried what the neighbors would say. She worried what the church would think. She worried that Janis was throwing her future away. And that worry over time became something else. It became distance. And Janis felt that distance every single day. Janis graduated from Thomas Jefferson High School in 1960. She enrolled briefly at Lamar State College of Technology, then later transferred to the University of Texas at Austin. and it was in Austin that the real tragedy of her teenage years reached its cruelest peak. In 1963, the campus humor magazine at the University of Texas ran a feature, a joke feature, a mocking feature, and the target of that feature was Janis Joplin. She was voted the ugliest man on campus. Let those words sit for a moment. The ugliest man on campus, a young woman, 20 years old, already carrying the wounds of a childhood spent being told she was not pretty enough, not thin enough, not quiet enough, not normal enough. And now, in what was supposed to be her escape, her new beginning, her chance to be someone else, she was publicly humiliated by the entire student body. Janis left Austin shortly after. She hitchhiked to San Francisco with a friend named Chet Helms. She ran from Texas. She ran from her parents' expectations. She ran from the laughter of classmates. She ran from every mirror that had ever told her she was not enough. And she ran straight into the music. But here is the part of the story that almost nobody talks about. Even as she ran, even as she sang in the coffee houses of North Beach and the blues bars of San Francisco, even as she slowly began to build a name for herself in the underground music scene, she never stopped writing home. She never stopped writing to Seth and Dorothy Joplin, the parents whose approval she was still chasing, the father whose quiet respect she still craved, the mother whose distance still hurt her. And those letters, those simple handwritten letters, reveal something that her stage performances never could. They reveal who Janis Joplin really was when the spotlight was turned off. The letters began in the early 1960s and continued until the very last weeks of her life. They are preserved today in archives and biographies, and anyone who reads them comes away with the same feeling, a feeling of deep, quiet sadness, because the Janis Joplin in those letters does not sound like the wild, screaming, liquor-drinking blues queen the world remembers. The Janis Joplin in those letters sounds like a daughter reporting her grades, a daughter describing her new apartment, a daughter asking about her younger brother Michael and her younger sister Laura, a daughter promising her mother that she was eating well, that she was being careful with money, that she was not getting into trouble. In one letter from 1966, shortly after she joined the band Big Brother and the holding company, she wrote to her parents with the excitement of a child bringing home a good report card. She told them about the band. She told them the name. She told them they were starting to get real bookings. She told them she was making actual money singing, not just a few dollars here and there, but real money. And then, in the most revealing sentence of all, she asked them if they were proud of her. Not if they were happy, not if they approved. She asked if they were proud, that one word, proud. It appears again and again in her letters across the years. And every time it appears, it is a question, not a statement. Because Janis was never sure of the answer. She sent them newspaper clippings, reviews from San Francisco papers, photographs of herself on stage, programs from festivals, anything that might convince her parents that the strange, loud, messy life she was building was a life worth being proud of. She wanted them to see what the world was starting to see, but she was never quite sure they were looking. Then came Monterey. In June of 1967, Big Brother and the holding company performed at the Monterey International Pop Festival. It was the performance that changed everything. Janis Joplin walked onto that stage as an unknown singer in an underground San Francisco band. She walked off as a national phenomenon. Her performance of the song Ball and Chain stunned everyone who saw it. The filmmaker D.A. Pennebaker, who was shooting a documentary about the festival, captured the moment on camera. And one of the most famous shots in rock and roll history is the face of Mama Cass Elliot, sitting in the audience, watching Janis sing. Her mouth is open. Her eyes are wide. She mouths one single word, wow. That single word, from one great singer to another, became the moment the world discovered Janis Joplin. Within weeks, she was on the cover of magazines. Within months, record labels were in a bidding war for her band. Within a year, she was one of the most talked about performers in American music. And what did Janis do? In the middle of all that sudden fame, she sat down and wrote a letter home. In that letter, she told her parents about Monterey. She described the crowd. She described the reviews. She described the attention. And once again, underneath every sentence, there was the same quiet question. Are you proud of me now? Is this enough? Is this finally enough? Seth and Dorothy Joplin read the letter. They wrote back as they always did. Polite letters, caring letters, but careful letters. Letters that never quite gave Janis the one thing she was asking for. Her father Seth was a man of quiet expression. He did not throw his feelings around. He rarely said the word proud out loud. And her mother Dorothy, watching her daughter drift further and further into a world Dorothy did not understand, could not bring herself to celebrate the transformation. Dorothy still hoped, quietly, that Janis would come home, become a teacher, become a wife, become someone Port Arthur could recognize. Janis was becoming a legend, and her parents, the two people whose approval she wanted most in the world, were not quite sure how to celebrate that. 1969, Janis left Big Brother and the holding company and formed a new group called the Cosmic Blues Band. She recorded an album, she toured Europe, she performed at Woodstock in front of hundreds of thousands of people. At 2 o'clock in the morning, after waiting backstage for 10 hours, she was, by any objective measure, a superstar. She had money, she had fame, she had the love of millions, and that summer, she made a decision that showed just how deep the wound from her childhood really was. She decided to go home. She decided to go back to Port Arthur, Texas, the town that had called her ugly. She decided to attend her 10-year high school reunion. It was August of 1970. Janis was 27 years old. She was at that moment one of the most famous singers in the world. She flew into Texas wearing feathers in her hair, rings on every finger, and a custom-made outfit that the conservative citizens of Port Arthur had never seen before. She brought a television crew with her. She told herself she was going for a laugh. She told interviewers she was going to show those people who had made fun of her in high school. She told everyone this was a joke, a stunt, a triumph. But anyone who watched the footage of that reunion, which was filmed for a documentary, can see the truth in her eyes. She was not laughing, she was searching. She was walking back into the room that had hurt her the most, hoping that this time, finally, she would be welcome. She held a press conference in Port Arthur. A reporter asked her if she had entertained much in high school. She paused. Her voice cracked slightly, and she answered, "Only when I walked down the aisles." The room laughed. Janis did not laugh, because it was not a joke, it was a memory. 10 years later, and the memory still hurt. At the reunion itself, some classmates approached her kindly. Others avoided her, some asked for autographs, some whispered behind her back, just like they had a decade before. And somewhere in that room, the ghost of a lonely teenage girl was standing next to the famous woman in feathers, trying to understand if anything had really changed. A few days after the reunion, she flew back to California. She sat down. She wrote a letter home. She told her parents about the trip. She told them about the people she had seen. She told them it had gone well. She told them she was fine. She was always telling them she was fine. In the autumn of 1970, Janis was working on a new album. It was going to be her masterpiece. She knew it. Her producer knew it. The musicians in her new backing group, Full Tilt Boogie Band, knew it. The album was being recorded at Sunset Sound Studios in Los Angeles. She was healthy. She had recently stopped drinking heavily. She was in love, at least she thought she was, with a young man she had met in Brazil earlier that year. She was writing to her parents almost every week. The letters from those final weeks are perhaps the most heartbreaking of all, because they are so ordinary, so hopeful. In one letter, she told her mother she was excited about the new album. She told her she thought it was going to be the best work of her career. She talked about buying a house. She talked about getting a dog. She talked about the future as if she fully expected to be there for it. She signed her letters with love, with warmth, with the careful affection of a daughter who still, after everything, wanted her parents to see her clearly. On October 1st, 1970, she recorded the instrumental track for a song called Buried Alive in the Blues. She planned to record her vocals the next day. She went back to her hotel, the Landmark Motor Hotel in Hollywood. She ate dinner. She went to a local bar. She came back to her room late. She never recorded those vocals. Janis Joplin died on October 4th, 1970 at the age of 27 from an accidental overdose of heroin. The album she had been working on was released a few months later. Her producer, Paul Rothchild, and her bandmates finished it without her, leaving the instrumental track for Buried Alive in the Blues as an instrumental because no other voice could replace hers. The album was titled Pearl. It became the biggest selling record of her career. It reached #1 on the Billboard charts. The song Me and Bobby McGee, which she had recorded in those final weeks, became a #1 single after her death. The world fell in love with Janis Joplin all over again, and Seth and Dorothy Joplin, sitting in their quiet home in Port Arthur, Texas, opened the last letters their daughter had ever sent them, and they read them, over and over again, for the rest of their lives. In the years after her death, Janis Joplin's parents rarely gave interviews. They were private people. They had lost a child. They did not want to talk about it in public. But every now and then, in small pieces, in careful conversations with biographers and journalists, fragments of their feelings emerged. Seth Joplin, in particular, seemed haunted by something he could not quite name. He had been a quiet man his whole life, a man who did not easily express affection, a man who believed deep down that love did not always need to be spoken to be real. But his daughter had needed it to be spoken, and he had not always known how to speak it. In one of the most quietly devastating moments recorded in any Joplin biography, Seth was asked, many years later, whether he had ever told Janis he was proud of her. He paused for a long time, and he said softly that he hoped she had known. He hoped. That is the word a father uses when he is no longer certain. Dorothy Joplin, for her part, kept every letter Janis had ever written her. Every single one. She stored them in boxes. She preserved them. She protected them. And eventually she donated many of them to archives so that scholars and biographers could understand the real Janis, not the Janis of the stage, the Janis of the page, the sister. The young woman who, even at the height of her fame, was still writing home like a college student reporting back to her family. Dorothy once said, in an interview, that she regretted not understanding her daughter better while she was alive. She said she wished she had known how much Janis had needed her approval. She said she wished she had given it more freely. It is one of the saddest sentences ever spoken by the parent of a rock star. There is a letter Janis wrote in the final year of her life that has become, among people who know her story, a kind of sacred document. In that letter, she told her parents about her plans. She told them about the album. She told them about the house she wanted to buy. And then, in a single line that cuts through every legend and every myth, and every image the world has ever built around her, she told them that she loved them. She told them she appreciated everything they had done for her. She told them she was sorry for the times she had disappointed them. And she asked them, one more time, in her gentle, searching way, if they understood her now, if they saw her now, if they were proud of her now. She did not live long enough to hear their answer. And that, in the end, is the true tragedy of Janis Joplin. Not the drugs, not the early death, not the lost albums and the canceled tours and the unrecorded songs. The true tragedy is that the loudest voice in rock and roll spent her whole life writing quiet letters to two people, asking a question she never got to hear answered out loud. There was a woman whose voice could shake an entire stadium. When she opened her mouth, 20,000 people would stop breathing at the same time. But when she picked up a pen and wrote the words "Dear Mom and Dad," she was no longer a rock star. She was a girl from Port Arthur, Texas, a girl who had been called ugly in high school, a girl who had been mocked in college, a girl who had built a career out of pain, because pain was the only thing that had ever sung back to her honestly. And that girl, underneath all the fame, underneath all the feathers and all the southern comfort and all the screaming blues, wanted only one thing. She wanted her father to say he was proud of her. She wanted her mother to say she understood her. She wanted the people who had made her, the people who had raised her, the people who had watched her grow from a bright child into a wounded teenager into a world-famous woman, to finally, simply see her. The letters are still there. They are in museums, they are in archives, they are in books that very few casual fans ever pick up. And if you read them carefully, slowly, without music playing in the background, you will meet a Janis Joplin that almost nobody knows. You will meet a daughter. You will meet a human being. You will meet the quietest version of the loudest voice in American music. And you will understand, maybe for the first time, that fame is not the same as being loved. That millions of strangers clapping in the dark cannot replace two people in a quiet house in Texas saying the words out loud, "We are proud of you." Janis Joplin gave the world her voice. She gave the world her pain. She gave the world songs that will still be played 100 years from now. But the one thing she wanted in return, the one small, simple thing she kept asking for in every letter she ever wrote home, she did not receive in the way she needed to receive it. And so she kept singing, and she kept writing, and she kept asking, until one October night in a small hotel room in Hollywood the asking finally stopped. If her story teaches us anything, it is this: the people in our lives who seem strongest are often the ones carrying the deepest longing. The voices that shake stadiums sometimes belong to hearts that just want to be heard by two people at a kitchen table, and the word proud spoken out loud at the right moment to the right person can be worth more than every standing ovation in the world. Say it to the people you love. Say it while they can still hear you, because somewhere in some quiet room, someone you love is writing a letter, and they are waiting for your answer.